Okay, so we've all heard the idea that we come from one consciousness, one source, light, that we come from God. And if you're like me, you think about these kinds of things, you're wondering how, well, how can that be? A few months ago, my son asked me this question, and I shared with him a perspective that helped me understand it. And it all starts with this. And so if you imagine that there's one light in here and one consciousness, one source light expressing from within this crystal. And as that light shines out, right, you see each one of these facets, that light shines out of that individual facet. Now, each of these facets come from a different angle, so they kind of have their own unique perspective, but it is not different from that light. It still has all the same qualities of that light, but just a unique perspective. And that's kind of like each one of us. So I see that as kind of like each one of us is one of these facets. But why don't we recognize that? And why do we forget who we are? Well, over time, we've kind of accumulated distortions over that fractal of light. For the sake of simplicity, let's just keep it to one lifetime and one dimension. And so when we're born, we're really close to our authentic expression, just kind of like boop, just coming out of this facet. And over time, though, we give up parts of ourselves, adopt programs, conditions, perceptions that were created in response to the circumstances that we we're born in. And so the circumstances that we we're born in this holographic world are also created by other fractals of this light, other people, and then the people that came before them. And so all of those distortions are compounding. And so thus we have this generational compounding of distortions. So what's happened is that we've ended up creating filters over our particular fractal of light. And some of it can be kind of like a little film, if you think of like a mirror, funhouse mirror in like the circus, and it has just a little warp. Still has your reflection, but there's a little warp in it, right? What can also happen and why there can be less light shining through these distortions, identities, programs can become so dense that they actually create more of like a filter. There's kind of an opacity and it allows less light to come through with that, which kind of participates in creating these distortions as this like self-aware neural network that's running a survival program. And so a funny thing, I was having a conversation with my son, the evolution of humanity, and he said, Mom, it's like humans are like iPhone 5s trying to download the latest apps. And what he was referring to is that we have still the hardwiring of survival, these primitive codes and programs, and which I think as a collective we're outgrowing. Well, hopefully. And the latest apps that we're trying to download into these survival programs are kind of more geared towards our interrelatedness or wholeness or connection to source, kind of like a me and a we. So the survival instincts are very me focused. And so some part of that expression of our light, expression of ourselves as a human now isn't really helpful for this new expanded state of awareness and consciousness. And right now, as a collective, we are actually shedding our iPhone 5 hardware and upgrading to new hardware. And not so we can download the latest apps, but we can actually access more of our conscious awareness and have more capacity to create the world and the reality that we live in. So right now, when we turn inward to the original light, it can be difficult to see, experience that original light from which we come from, but it doesn't mean it's not there. It's just obscured, and it is your essence. And so there are a lot of practices that have been around for a long time, and actually some new things too, that allow us to have these momentary glimpses of what that space is like, the space without filters, our expanded self, our self connected to everything, that oneness space, the space of the field of love. And so what happens though, when we have these, couple of things happen, but I will just speak to one, is that we come back and we have these habits of being that are programmed into us because of these distortions. And so that can make it a little bit difficult to stabilize our awareness in the truth of who we are. And so if you're like me, who have had to learn through integrating complex trauma, there are several ways to do this work. There are a lot of shortcuts out there now, including technologies, both outer technologies, but also reacquainting ourselves with like old mystical technologies like breath work that help us in clearing these distortions without bypassing the work. One of the things I've realized in my own journey that has helped to move things along is that it's important to have context of identity before you approach or while you approach all of your healing, and to begin to know that you are an expression of this one light, an expression of love, expression of source, expression of God. And that is a seed to keep planted in your heart and to keep nurturing that seed. So hopefully that will give you some context, just a perspective to play with and contemplate around being connected to source light, being an expression of source, of love, of God, that this is useful for your journey in remembering who you are. You are loved, and I love